Christians today often argue that the devil rebelled and took a third of the angels with him. But the question is that really what the text says? Because some would say yes and some would say no. And if it is, was this before primeval days, as in before the time period of Genesis 3? Or is there something else going on here in the text that we often misunderstand or overlook due to a lack of understanding the Greek or just a lack of checking context? Let's dive into it. Welcome everyone, my name is Josh and I am one of the lead members of the Call to Defend team here, and we have our purpose here of helping you grow and understand the text and your relationship with the Lord and understand apologetics, theology, polemics, Hebrew, Greek, etc. With this question of did the devil rebel and take a third of the angels with him being a popular statement made by many Christians, the question is that really what the text says? I'm here to tell you it's not really what it says. So let's look at the context here. Revelation 12. Let's read it first from verse 1. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. All right, so right now we have this woman who's giving birth, and she has all these symbols of resembling different things, resembling Israel, resembling Mary, resembling Eve, resembling so many things. And there's great discussion over who this woman is, but she's not going to be the primary focus. What I want to focus on is the next bit right here. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. So right there is verse 4, the famous verse saying his tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. But notice that this is in the event of a child being born, one who's going to rule over everything. And the question is this when the devil rebelled, or is there something else going on here? I would contend that this is not about the devil's rebellion, because right now we have a child being born, which many scholars would agree that this refers to the Christ, the one who is going to be ruling over all nations. But even if it's not about the Christ, there was no child being born described to rule over all things prior to Genesis 3. And even then, in Genesis 3, there is no child being born at all. So the question is this about when the devil rebelled? First off, time period, no, the devil rebelled prior to this event. And so what we have here is a spiritual warfare that's taking place. Because what does he do? It says his tail swept down. So we take this Greek word here. We can see that this word refers to dragging, pulling away. This is a forceful drag. This is not enticing. This is not coercing. This is forceful motion. This is him taking and throwing. So his tail drags them. He grabs onto them and throws them. And throws the stars down. Now, there's still even question among scholars if the stars here refers to angels, because often you have star language refers to angels. I'm going to grant that it means angels. So if it means angels, does it say that he convinced a third of the angels to rebel with him? No, it says he dragged them. Okay? But we're not done. The next word is we have, and it cast them to the earth. Okay? So what we have here is, for this Greek word, a lot of different usages. We can see a lot of the usages revolve around a forceful throwing away, to cause to move from one location to another through a use of forceful motion, the throw, another word for throw, and it keeps going, to cause or to let fall down like a tree, so to make sure it crashes, to make sure it's thrown. There's more that could be said with this word here, but notice that we have put or putting, but if we look at the putting, be put in prison, neither is new wine put into old wineskin. Neither is new wine put into old wineskin. The put here, if we keep going through various examples, they don't really involve one that is of choice. So obviously it's not like these spiritual beings rebelled. In fact, it uses a lot of forceful language. There is no control over it. And so what we have here is the fact that this is being translated right here in the ESV as cast them to the earth. In other translations, as thrown down to the earth. So we have here is a dragon who's taken his tail, grabs the stars, drags them down, and throws them. Why? Because the very next statement, and the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. His goal here is to devour the child. Now, it would be really odd here if this verse was about him convincing a third of the stars to rebel with him, because they don't do anything here. In fact, it seems more of the issue is that they are in the way, because his desire is to destroy this child, but in his way are these stars, if we grant that these are angels. Now, we also notice though, it's the next bit right here. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back. So there are angels who rebelled and teamed up with Satan. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven, and the great dragon was thrown down. So this is all happening after the birth. This is all happening after the birth of this child. Again, there is no child being born in Genesis 3. There is no child being born prior to the narrative of Genesis 2. But those who argue this is about the primeval rebellion of the devil, it doesn't make sense here, because a child is being born, one who's going to rule over all. This child and his mother is being protected, prepared with places to be nourished. We keep going here, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven, and the great dragon was thrown down. Now what's interesting is if you look at this Greek word right here, look at the bottom, what we see here is the same Greek root as the one is casting over here. But the great dragon was thrown down, balo. And then it goes on, the ancient serpent who is called the devil and the Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down, balo. Again, this language here, John is not using language of enticement or of gentle placing. He's using language of violence, of warfare. This dragon and his followers are thrown down. And prior to that, he throws stars down, which seem to be in his way. So first off, is this primeval days? It cannot be, because we have here is this child is being born. And this child is one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And then her child was caught up to God and to his throne. We can make the argument here that this refers to the Christ in some ways. Because why? We have a child who's being born, who's a male, that will rule over all nations. But then also you have the very fact that he's caught to God's throne. Well, in the biblical narrative, there are only really 3 people who are ascended. We have Enoch, Elijah, and the Christ. It seems to be that this is referring to the work of Christ, and that there's spiritual warfare that comes about because of Christ. And there's a spiritual war that's taking place because of the fact that he died and he rose, conquering death. Now, we're not going to get to the whole ins and outs of the Revelation passage, but let's go now to Genesis 3 and see, is there anything here that really says, we have a dragon here and we have a serpent, Nachash. When we go through here, what we have is just a woman who is Eve, Adam, which is the man, the serpent, and then later God. There is no discussion of a person being born until the end. The Lord God said to the serpent, or the Nachash, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. We have a video coming out next week on Wednesday regarding our first session of the devil and looking at Genesis 3 and comparing it to some other passages that seem to reflect back onto Genesis 3. But notice here, we have a promise of the one being born, but there isn't one being born yet. Versus here, someone is being born. And this is what the dragon wants to destroy. And does it teach that the devil took a third of the angels down with him in his initial rebellion? It does not. And we as Christians should stop using this as a talking point and start letting the text actually say what it has originally said this entire time. The text hasn't changed, but our statements have. And we should stop and be aware of the things we say and make sure, are we saying what the text says, and not just in English, but is it what it says in the original language?